Hello, everyone. I am Jenny Douglas, the hosting director for Revel, a community and events platform for women in midlife and beyond who are seeking to reimagine the possibilities for themselves, for ourselves, as we age. And it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome to Revel's podcast, Raging Gracefully, Katherine Bradford. Katherine, you're a figurative painter who paints big and bold, whose characters often include swimmers and superheroes, and whose critics describe your work as simultaneously representational, abstract, and metaphorical. It is said that your figures often defy society's expectations of women and all genders and serve as surrogates for a mother, painter, and lesbian coming of age at the turn of the 21st century. Your recent show at the Portland Museum of Art in Portland, Maine, which ran from June through this past September, and which brought me to my knees, Flying Woman, the paintings of Katherine Bradford, was the first museum survey of your extraordinary work. And seeing them in person, really, I'm just so grateful that I had the courage to approach you in August when I was there with a group of Revel women, because you in fact you provided the seed for this idea of late bloomers. I thought it was just an interesting interrogation, and I was so grateful to you when you so kindly agreed to accept an email that I went on to send you a few weeks later. But anyway, I'm just so glad to have you here for our semi-regular late bloomers series. And I do want to also just say what we said before. This is a webinar initially, so there are some people, some revelers who are present. If any of you have any questions that you would like to ask Katherine over the course of this conversation, please put them in the chat box, and I will try my hardest to get them to you in the space that we have. And then, as I said, after, as Sydney and I mentioned to you, Katherine, after this event, this will turn into a podcast, Raging Gracefully, which will be made more widely available. But I guess my first question to you, since this is a late bloomers series, is you are now 80 years old and you just had your first solo show. Would you say that late bloomer is a descriptor that you identify with?
Well, I like what you said a little while ago, is something about we bloom when we're ready to. Is that what you said?
Well, that's what I feel. I don't want to, I don't want to sway the witness here, but that's always, well, I have felt especially, and I know you're not interviewing me, I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but let's call it a conversation. I have always felt that women especially, we bloom in different ways at different times over the course of our lives. And we also bloom, as you say, I think maybe you said it, not me, but I love it, when we're ready to.
Well, I've certainly been described as a late bloomer, but since you got me thinking about the term, I guess blooming, you need good soil and water, and then eventually the flower pops open and you get a bloom. But right. I sort of think what's happened to me is more like brick by brick. I built the career in life that I wanted. I mean, I've never heard anyone describe Nancy Pelosi, who happens to be about my age, as a late bloomer. I mean, she's extraordinary, but I think she did it a bit by bit. She's right. She had 5 children. That astounds me. And she got involved in politics, and now she's very important. I think she built a career. Good for her.
Well, and I think this idea of brick by brick is so apt, and I think makes so much sense. That I remember going to a reading at the Brooklyn Public Library of the writer Carmen Belosa, and I walked right in and I heard her say, "You start off blinded and you work until you begin to see." And I just thought that was such a beautiful idea. I don't know if you can resonate with it or not, but I think the idea of kind of like, you take whatever your metaphor is, you start with a brick, and then summon the next brick.
Yeah, and brick on top of brick, you get a nice high pile, but it's a little different than a bloom, seems
Yeah.
to me, which bursts out suddenly.
That's I never even thought of that, like the idea of a bloom bursting subtly. That, yeah, it would make sense, actually, that blooming maybe is not a word that makes as much sense for you and maybe for others.
Right. It's certainly been written that, as you alluded to, I'm getting more attention and more opportunities to show my work now. And I'm always kind of amused at that, because as I built up this life as an artist, I always thought at each step that I was doing fine. I was really grateful for every show, or when people paid attention to my work and bought something. I always thought it was great. And I wasn't measuring how much success I was getting, really.
Well, that's really interesting, because it kind of leads into a kind of question that's related, which is, having read about your bio, and you were born in 1942 in New York City. My understanding is that your mother was not particularly encouraging of your assuming the artist life. And after graduating from Bryn Mawr, you married a man and moved to Maine. And it seems to me, and you can affirm or contradict me, or tell me I'm wrong if I am wrong, that there were certain pressure points where you had to have a pretty strong sense of who you were, and not have your personal affirmation be provided by what was around you in order to keep going. Would you say that that is correct?
It sounds good, hearing you describe that. No, I had a lot of doubt. That mother, incidentally, was a very visual, quite brilliant person, and filled our childhood with a lot of art. And then you said the life of an artist. That's what, every mother thinks they've figured out a way to live, and that's what they want to see their children do. And I just think that what she thought of as an artist was someone who struggled and was poor and drank and got divorced, and a lot of things she didn't want me to have to go through.
Yeah.
And since I was already married and had 2 little children when I just decided to myself that what I really wanted was to be an artist, a real artist, a full-time artist. I think she thought that it would be very hard. It would be very hard for me to do. In fact, I think everyone thought that. And they were perhaps right. But now you said I had to be very steadfast. I don't know. I took one step at a time. And there were often moments when I thought that it wasn't going to work out at all.
It's so interesting. I mean, I guess what I'm curious about, especially because our audience is women in midlife who might be at a crossroads and trying to figure out from where to summon the personal courage and personal authority to keep going, even if there are naysayers around them, or even if they don't have a personal history of a certain kind of achievement. I'm just curious on your journey from where you found courage and solace and the fortitude to take another step and put another brick on your brick pile.
Right. Well, the key thing was that I began to get to know other artists. And that was really important, because I barely really knew what an artist was. And I was very influenced by my friends who I could see what they were doing and how they lived and the freedom that they led into their life. And I was very attracted to that.
Mm. Mm.
And,
So
and I've heard many artists say that what you need most is a community, even though it's considered a life, a solitary life. Certainly making the work can be solitary, but it's really key to be connected to other artists and what's going on. At least I think it's key.
Well, I did want to ask you, and I'm just going to skip ahead because it sounds like my understanding is that that community is critical to you and that you have also really been a community builder in your life. I think you co-founded the Union of Maine Visual Artists in 1975 when you moved to, is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. And I know that, because Revel is a platform where we really do, we've got 32,000 members across the country. We're growing every day. And I really see, as Revel's hosting director, the power in our community is that we bear witness to one another. We don't rescue one another. We don't prognosticate. We don't provide prescriptions, but we bear witness. And in doing that, I'm thinking about, there's a South African philosophy of Ubuntu that holds that the only way I can be human is for you to reflect my humanity back at me. And I think that feels critical to being alive, right? It allows you then to be in solitude painting, I would imagine.
Well, when I was a young wife and mother, it was the 70s, and I was living in Maine, which was quite an interesting place with a lot of what you might call hippies. And the women's movement was very strong. And I joined a consciousness raising group, which was great. I really felt I needed it. I needed just what you're saying, people to reflect who I was, of people who I could talk openly to. I think a lot of women felt that way. Maybe this is an outgrowth, what you're doing, of consciousness raising groups.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Betty Friedan, and did she write Of Woman Born, or was that Audrey and Rich? I can't quite remember, but I was a Sarah Lawrence. I was a Sarah Lawrence women's studies major, and I read all those books, and I had my own consciousness raised, but a fair number of years after you.
Well, maybe it's confidence. Your confidence in who you are and what you can amount to.
Right.
Raised.
So is it fair to say that your seed of an idea of wanting to be a painter was able to be amplified by the community that you created for yourself, both in Maine and in New York?
Amplified? It was also kind of pushed back because I took my 2 children as a single mother and moved to New York, which is the center of the art world and a tough place. And I wouldn't say anyone was inviting me here or really happy to see me here. So I got a lot of people kind of dismissed me at first. And the way I felt about that was, boy, if I ever succeed in any way, I'm not going to act like they're acting. I just thought it was horrible. I just thought that was inexcusable to be mean and to try and make a hierarchy. And I still feel that.
That's so interesting because the first thing, I spotted you at the Portland Museum of Art at your show in August when I brought a group of revelers. And the first thing I was struck by was how kind and accessible your face was. And that you were really, I'm not being falsely praising, but I really noticed it. The way that you stopped to talk to people, that you gave them your full attention. And that's not typical, although I don't know, maybe I'm curious to know whether that harsh reception that you received back in the day, I wonder if things have changed in the art world, if the art world is more welcoming of people who don't fit inside the traditional canon, or maybe if the traditional canon doesn't really exist anymore.
Well, you know, what I love most about the art world is it's full of all the people who didn't fit. You remember the people in high school who were the artists? They were often the outsider.
Yeah.
And perhaps they made their way to New York. So it's a huge bunch of people who felt that they were different for one reason or another and came to New York with a dream.
Right.
That's pretty powerful.
Yes, for sure.
And I love that. I really
and you're
love
also
it.
saying some of them though were mean, you know. So I mean, there's many layers to a situation, right?
Well, they were competitive. And I think they thought that I was kind of over my head. Like, what did I think I was doing? And that was a bad feeling. Definitely.
Interesting. I was interested to read that you reject, when others describe your painting style as self-taught, you don't like that. You prefer the term crude, which I thought was really interesting.
I prefer the term gorgeous and masterful and fabulous. That's what I like.
I just thought crude was such a great word. I hardly ever hear it used, but it's really just like, I don't know, it's so unpretty, which kind of, I think I would imagine describes like really getting in there and making something from the ground up when you don't necessarily know what you're doing, where you're going.
You mean the word crude?
Yeah. I mean, how did you choose crude as a word, if it's even something that you still relate to?
I think my style is kind of rough. And if you're looking, my students, because I taught for many years so that I wouldn't go broke, my students always admired details, and they'd always judge art on how carefully and correctly the artist got the details. That I thought was one way to look at art, but not the way not anything I thought was important. Anyway, self-taught. I don't think I'm self-taught, and I think everybody's self-taught as we go along. And what I was given was the tools to learn. I was given a very good education, not in art. So maybe that's why people are saying I was self-taught, because I don't have the kind of resume where I went to a fancy art school and got degrees. I didn't do that, but I knew how to get what I needed.
How did you know?
Yeah. Well, I was sitting next to a young guy last night who was asking me questions about how he could learn about art. And he was studying finance at NYU. And I said, you know, it's not going to be necessarily the way you're learning finance. I said, go and look at art and develop some opinions and start getting to feel what you love and what you hate. I don't think what I'm doing is necessarily an intellectual pursuit. In fact, the artists I know who are very brainy, I think it kind of gets in their way. I think you find some place in you that's playful and whimsical and original. And I mean, think of someone like Picasso, who was a genius, but he didn't talk about the books he read.
Right. Right. Yeah. That can be very distancing. I mean, everything that you're talking about in terms of what you gravitate to when you make art yourself and what you encourage others to think about, to me, feels it's all about what makes you feel alive.
Yes, that's right.
And move towards that. It's actually kind of simple in some ways.
Well, it's also kind of general. I mean, I think that's very hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
And
until you start doing it, right? And then you develop a practice of it.
Well, the way art is taught is with a lot of feedback. You do something and then you get reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a set of rules. My daughter went to law school, and I think the way she learned law was very different than the way I learned art.
Which is to
and then she got a degree, and she knew she was a lawyer, but I never got anything that said, okay, now you're an artist.
Right. But I also hear you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, that there's some freedom in, I don't know, not having the affirmation, the official affirmation of whoever it is affirms us, that you just do your own thing and you find some, maybe there's a bit of a rebel quality, and you also have found possibly your greatest freedom in carving out your own way and defining yourself for yourself.
Yes, it's really been fantastic. This putting one brick on top of another. It's been so exciting.
I love that.
So
go ahead.
So rewarding, really, to do that.
I'm curious to know, when you talk about brick by brick, where you are in your building now. Do you feel like, what does the brick structure look like? Is it halfway built? Do you even think that way? Do you have other towers that you want to build? Are you just going to see tomorrow where the brick is that you want to put, where you want to put it? How do you kind of imagine that?
And as you're talking, I'm imagining this foot coming along and kicking it all over.
Oh no!
That happens sometimes too.
And then you just start again. It's like a sandcastle.
Yeah, all right. Of course, I don't know at all. I don't know. And when I hit 80 years old, I thought, oh boy, I better use my remaining time very well. I would like to leave my children with a strong legacy and not a lot of problems. Not an attic full of unsold paintings.
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, side note, I'm in Hudson, New York right now, and Joan Didion, there's a big auction of all of her stuff right up the street from me at a gallery.
In Hudson, New York?
Yeah, in Hudson, New York. There's a gallery here that somehow or other, I don't know why they were chosen, but it's left me feeling a little melancholy because I don't know, just like she had all this art and her writing table and her little pencils and little notes from people, and it's all for sale now. And maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about what I think about it all. So,
tragically, her daughter, her one child, died. So
yeah,
maybe that. I saw a fabulous show in Los Angeles. I just had a show in Los Angeles, and there was a show about Joan Didion and her influence on the visual arts.
I heard about that. That was recent, right? Like in the past few. Right.
I think it's still up at the Hammer Museum.
A question for you. In terms of your process, I read that you paint every day. Do you still paint every day?
As opposed to what?
Well, I guess as opposed to painting when you feel like it. I mean, the coolness of, like, in my imagination, painting every day is you paint whether you think you're good or not. You paint whether it's raining or sunny. You paint regardless of what anyone else thinks about your work. You just paint. And it was an appealing idea to me.
I'm just feeling so fortunate because for many years I was running a household and raising children and doing teaching jobs. And now my children are grown and I don't have to take outside jobs.
Mm.
And so I can paint every day. So man, I run over here. I get up and I want to come here and see what the painting I was working on yesterday, if I can make it a little better. Or you know, that I was telling this to a doctor, and he said, "Oh, I get it. It's like being in a lab and a lot of experiments, and you want to see how they're turning out."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Yes, I suppose so. It is like that."
I love hearing that when you talk about running to your studio in the morning, because you still have the pulse of yesterday's work within you. And again, not to be too trite about it, but thinking about this idea of late bloomers, or if we want to apply it in some brick language, we could do that. And thinking about women's lives historically. And I mean, I'm 59 and I'm feeling the freedom myself of my kids are 24 and 28. I love this time of life that I can really.
You're home free. You're there.
It's exciting.
Perhaps.
And I feel like I want to do whatever my version is of your focus and concentration and laying claim day after day. I want that for myself, and I want it for every woman in midlife who might be feeling possibly like, you know, now what, and feeling afraid. And I guess my question, if you have
you're doing it. You're a great organizer, and you've got this podcast.
Well, it's not mine. I'm a sub, but thank you. What do you have advice, Kathy, for, you know, given that we are this community hub of women across the country, many of whom are approaching a transition or coming out of one or heading into one, you know, how does one stay steadfast in the face of living in a culture that doesn't necessarily do a lot of affirming of women post 40 or 50? Where do you find, you know, I don't know, do you have anything to throw out at all for any of us who might be like, how do I do this? How do I go forward? And if not bloom fully, where do I find the next brick?
Well, I've already talked about surrounding yourself with people who interest you and believe in you. So I'm going to say something that I say to a lot of younger artists, and I can tell that it's not what they want to hear. So I'm going to say it anyway. Every day, write 5 emails of appreciation and 5 emails of thanks. Because you're going to need a lot of people to help you. And you need to acknowledge that they've done something and you appreciate it. And also, if you want them to pay attention to you, say something to them about something you like, or you noticed, or they said, or meant something to you. Now, a lot of this goes on online. I think it's a great place to exchange helpful things with people. I really believe in it. I know a lot of people dismiss social media, but I believe in it as a great tool to get out of yourself and acknowledge other people, to pay attention to other people. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that it's self-promotion. That is the worst use of it. I think promoting other people is the best use of it.
I totally agree. I remember coming across something on Facebook years ago that always stayed with me. And it was a little picture and it said, how to be alone. And then underneath it, remember at any given moment, there are 1,000 things you can love.
Oh, that's nice.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
And that really, like, I've held on to that. I'm going to hold on to your advice too, Katherine, That's beautiful. And I'm actually going to share it on social media because I think it's beautiful. And I'm going to, as one of my 5 emails of appreciation, what was it? Appreciation and what?
Thanks.
And thanks. And are those 10 emails or is it 5 emails of appreciation and thanks? It's 5 of appreciation and 5 of thanks.
This young guy came up to me and he said, why are you saying 5? I mean, what's this about 5? And I said, well, look, if I said 1 or 2, you'd say, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. So I'm saying 5.
5. Okay, but not 10, not 5 appreciation and 5 thanks. 5 emails that can be appreciation and thanks. I just need to make sure I've got my homework right.
Listen, the more you do it, the better.
Okay. Well, guess who I'm going to write an email of appreciation and thanks to today?
Well,
You.
I hope you get a lot of them yourself.
Well, this has been so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you took the time. I really wasn't sure if you would agree to this because, you know, I'm sure you get lots of requests, but I really want to thank you very much. This was incredibly nourishing for me, and I'm sure it will be for our audience.
And thank you for your good questions. Thank you for sticking to your word that it wouldn't take very long. And thank you for, before we started recording, you warned me or you gave me a preview of what might come of this.
You are welcome.
Very thoughtful of you.
Well, again, thanks so much, Katherine. My best to you. I can't wait to see what work you create next. And, you know, I can't wait to see the seeds that you have now planted in me and what I might do as a result of this conversation and your being around. So thank you.
Well, thank you to you too.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.